We are back for the second part of lesson 7. We have added our Google API keys to our app settings.json. And now we need to do two more things to configure our app. The first thing we need to do is we need to install a package. And the easiest way to do this, we can either do it through the console, through the PowerShell window, or if we want to do it a simpler way, you can always go to Tools, Nuget Package Manager, and you can manage Nuget packages for solution. So this is like the GUI version of the package manager. So I'm going to use this instead. So this shows us what packages are already installed. We see all these in the dependencies folder under packages. So I'm going to click on Browse, and I'm going to search for Authentication.Google. So a number of packages are going to come up. I'll also give you the command. I'll put it in the chat. If you want, you can use the package manager console. You can run the install-package Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Authentication.Google. So if you want to install it from Package Manager Console, you can. Or you can use the GUI tool. So here, if I browse for Authentication.Google, I just click on this first package, almost 38 million downloads, click on my project, and I can click the Install button. This is going to ask if I accept the license agreement. I will just click Accept. So this then adds this dependency. If I go back to Solution Explorer, I've now got Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Authentication.Google 319 installed. So again, you can use the visual package manager if you like, or you can use the package manager console and run the command. Either one will do. So now our application has the Google library that it needs. So our last step is in startup.cs. We've got to enable Google Authentication when our project starts. We're going to enable it using the API keys in app settings.json. So go to your startup file. And I want to add some code after line 35. So line 33 to 35, we modified this section last week, right? We toggled the require confirm account from false to true, and we added this line to add roles so that we could manage not only user authentication, but we could also manage role-based authorization. So after we do that, we want to enable Google Auth using the API keys we created in the Google Dev Console. So we're going to add to our services, we're adding authentication. Now we can chain a bunch of methods together here. So for example, if we wanted Google and Microsoft authentication, which we will, we can add both of them in this one call. So for starters, notice I now have an add Google method we can invoke. This comes from the dependency we just installed. So I'm going to add Google. And when we call add Google, we need to provide a couple of options. What options does our Google service need? Well, our client ID and our client secret. So we'll set up some options. Oops. So we're going to define two options. The first one is our client ID. Which we're going to read from our app settings under, so configuration, we'll use get section. Which is our authentication Google section. And in here, we want the value client ID. I will add this code so you can paste it. So from our authentication section and our Google subsection, we also want the client secret. So this is going in startup. So what's in blue is new, and it's after our call to add default identity. And I've also put the link to the code in the chat. So for now, we're reading the values from appsettings.json. So I should be able to try this out now. We've put the keys in our app settings. We've installed the package that we need. And we've configured Google Authentication when our application starts up to read the Google Client ID and secret that we created in the Google console. So I'm going to try it out now. So I'm going to click on my login page again. And instead of this message about there being no external services, I should get a Google button here instead. So we've enabled our Google service. The question, does it work? Well, let's try it. So I'll click my Google button. It takes our application name, which I put in. I'll pick a Google account I'm already signed in with. Tells me I've successfully authenticated with Google. It copies my Google email in here, and now it lets me register and signs me in. If I go to SQL Server, I can check my database. I'll look in the beer store database, and I should see one record now in the ASP.NET user logins with the Google provider. So I will connect to my beer store. Oh, I may be working locally. I'm working locally. So if I check my local database and look in my beer store, in my ASP.NET user logins table, I now have a login. Okay, Stella, at what point do you get that error? Can you load the login page? Does the app not run? When does that error
It's
happen?
when I click on the button to go to the Google, like it, where you should see all like your Google accounts. That's when
Yep.
it says authorization error 401 invalid underscore client. The OAuth client was not found.
Okay. Do you want to turn on your screen share for just a sec, and we can look at a couple things? Okay, let's look at the developer console for a minute, please. Okay, you've picked external. That's good. Okay, and go to credentials. Okay, click the little edit link beside your beer store client over on the right. Yep, let's look there. Um, okay, so this is a web application. Um, okay, copy the client ID again. Let's grab that whole value. Okay, copy it. And let's go back to your app settings.json and let's make sure that value is correct. Ah, there. You've got, look at the front. Hang on. Undo. Click Control Z. See the front there? You've got an extra quote. There you go. That's why.
Okay, thanks.
That should fix it. Okay, so my login is working. My Google login is working. But I'm using, so I can use app settings.json. It's not really the recommended place to store these keys. It's not ideal. So I'm going to show you now as well how I can store them using in my local, on my local site, or if I don't even want to include app settings.json in my project, maybe I want to add it to my git ignore, for example. We're going to look at how do we use the secret key and then the Azure configuration. So I just need to, I need to change my database connection for a moment. So bear with me while I do that. Because I'm not using an Azure database, I'm going to change my connection so that I am using an Azure database. Okay, so I'm going to use this database. So I'm going to go to the package manager console. And in here, I need to make sure I'm in my project directory. So the first thing I'm going to do, and these commands are on D2L, but I'm going to go a little further back. First, I'm going to run a dir command in package manager console. So I'm in my root folder where my solution is. I'm not inside the web project. So I want to go inside my beer store folder. So then I'm going to run the command Some of you are already in your web folder. If you can see your models using controllers, that's good. I need to do CD. I need to be inside my web project so it looks like this. I can see the controllers, the models, the views. And then I'm going to initialize the user secrets section. And then I'm going to add 2 user secrets, Authentication Google Client ID and Authentication Google Client Secret. And I'm going to paste those values in either from the Google console or from appsettings.json. So I'll put all these in the chat. So first I'm going to run the command .net user-secrets init. Okay, tells me it's already been initialized. That's fine. So then I'm going to create my client ID secret. But before I run this command, I need to put in my client ID. So I'm going to go get my client ID and paste it in and run the command. So it's saved the Authentication Google Client ID to the secret store. I then want to do the same thing with my client secret value. So I'm going to add a second secret called Authentication Google Client Secret and make sure I change the value. I'm now going to modify the code in startup actually, you know what? I don't think I have to modify the code. I believe this will override what's in appsettings.json. It's first going to look for this section. So I think we can actually leave our code. The thing is, these keys, they don't exist on Azure. So we don't really need both. We don't need this section. So I'm just going to comment out everything here for a moment and make sure my login still runs. I'm commenting out the section from appsettings.json. So I want to check that my Google login is still working. So I've taken the keys out of appsettings.json. I've stored them in the secret key store instead. So now my Google Auth is still enabled. And I can still log in, even though I've removed this section from appsettings.json. So it's using my key store instead. This is more secure instead of putting the credentials in our appsettings.json. Convenient for development in appsettings.json, not great for production. So this is all working, but it all only works locally. I also want this to work if I publish my website to Azure. Now, Azure doesn't have a secret key store. It's got a separate configuration section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to publish this app. I'm going to publish my changes to GitHub. And then I also want to set up the Google Client and Google Client Secret in Azure. And my redirect URI will also allow my Google sign-in to work on my Azure site. So I'm going to go to my Team Explorer and I'm going to push all my changes up to GitHub. In my beer store, so this is L7, Google Auth. You're going to push everything to GitHub. I'm going to go to my Azure portal. I have a test site set up. Whoops. I'm going to deploy through the Kudu app service. I'll pick my beer store. Not sure where my continue button is. Okay. Let me make sure my push worked, my commit worked. Says it did. I've pushed to my beer store. Maybe I need to start my site. I think I'll start my site. And we'll try again. So I'll deploy from GitHub. There. Pick my beer store. Because my server was stopped, I couldn't deploy. So I'll click continue. So this is going to redeploy the site. So I'll wait for this to run. And then I'm going to try the Google login on Azure. It's not going to work yet because my Google keys, they don't exist on Azure. They only exist in my local key store. So I'm going to need to fix that. So again, you don't have to do this today. You don't have to deploy your beer store to Azure, but you do need to for your assignment. So my site's running. It's still running my deployment command. That's giving me an old version of the website. So I'll just have to wait a minute till this is finished. Okay, it says it's active. So I should get the beer store now. But when I go to log in, I got to get my Google button. Let's see what happens here. Okay, I admit to being a bit confused why this worked. I didn't expect it to work. Let's just see. Oh, here's why, because I already set it up on the test store. Silly me, I meant to delete these. Where do we put the keys in the Azure portal? Here, under configuration, we need to click new application settings. So I've already done this. Here is my authentication :Google client ID. And then I paste it in the value. And here is my client secret. So this is kind of like the Azure version of the key store, the secret store. And once you add a key, you click save. I didn't realize I'd already put in my keys. So for assignment 2, if you're going to use the key store, which I recommend not using app settings.json, you'll have to create these keys in Azure and paste in your values, as well as adding them locally in the package manager user secret store. Now I've put these instructions, they're all here, how to do this. So on Azure, you click on configuration, you click new setting, you enter authentication Google client ID and paste in your value, and you do it again with the secret. So all the instructions are on D2L in this slide deck, as well with screenshots, as well as doing it in the key vault. So I've given you all the commands you need and the screens here. Are there any questions about using the secret store and the Azure Key Vault? I guess I shouldn't call it a key vault. It's really just a configuration settings. If you don't include your app settings.json, you can also add your database connection string here. In the configuration section, you can set up a connection string here for Azure. So you could move your database connection out of app settings.json and put it into your Azure configuration if you want. We've got one more activity for today. So I'm going to stop the recording shortly. You have the rest of class to do the activity. It will count for your kind of in-class learning activity mark. So if you're watching this video later, you can do the activity on your own, and you'll need to publish your solution to GitHub and invite me and email a link to me to show me that you've done it. If you're staying here in class, I'm going to give you time to work in groups to do it. So here's what we're going to do. Here's the activity. It's on D2L. So what I want you to do is enable Microsoft sign-in in your beer store. So the link is on D2L. There's a couple of links you need. So either you're doing this on your own outside of class, or you have the rest of class today to do it. So the link is here to the tutorial. And then the specific link for Microsoft you can also find here on D2L. You go here, this is actually in the Azure portal where you set up an app, you generate keys, and then there's instructions in the tutorial. The setup is mostly the same for Microsoft, but it's a little bit different, 90% the same. So I'm going to stop recording and stop my screen share. We've got, how many students do we have left in the class? We got 23 students left. So I'm going to assign you randomly into breakout groups, maybe of about 4 students. I'll create 6 groups. I'm going to recommend one person share their screen, turn on your microphones, and work together to try and get your Microsoft authentication enabled. There's also an option that we don't want it to be internal. We want it to be external. So any Microsoft account will do. Okay, I will jump in and out of the breakout rooms and you're free to ask questions. But by the end of today, I'd like to see that you've got your Microsoft login working. Okay, are there any questions before I put you into the breakout groups?
Quick little question slash comment thing. My Google one's still not working.
Okay, we can perhaps look at that after, Stella.
Okay, thanks.